Welcome, everybody. My name is Shannon Kelly. For those of you that I haven't met, although I think I've met most of you, I am the director of the Department of Faith Formation for the Episcopal Church and the officer for Young Adult and Campus Ministries. And it's really good to have you all with us today. This is a yearly grant process that we have. This one is really for 2021, but it starts in 2020. And so that's why I put 2020/2021. I have to find my mouse. There we go. Just to start with, this is the grant timeline, which of course is on the website. Welcome, you are in the webinar right now. So during the month of October and clear until November 20th, you can be working on your application. The online portal to submit your grant application will open on October 13th. And so I'll send out a newsletter and Facebook links and all that kind of stuff when that is open. And on the web page itself, there will be a link to that submission portal. That remains open until November 20th at 10 p.m. Eastern. And then what happens between November and January is that a faithful group of readers gets to read all of the grants. And that is made up of executive council member, myself, my council, and Wendy and Bronwyn sometimes also read them. If we have over 100 grants, that's about the amount of people that can handle reading 100 grants. If we have more than that, then I pull in other colleagues to help us read. So between November 20th and December, I think it's 10th or 15th, when we meet to discern the grants, we all spend time reading and reflecting, and then we get together as a group and discern those. Usually we do that face-to-face to help with conversation. Obviously this year we're doing it virtually. Once we're done with that, we send those recommendations to executive council, and they are the ones that actually vote on or approve our recommendations. They've never not approved them, but there are always times when they have questions or clarifications. So that is just a general overview of the timeline. This year, real quick, we have around $133,000. We might have a small chunk of change extra. Finance is still trying to get me the actual number, but that's roughly what we have. We have 4 categories of grants: our leadership grant, our campus ministry grants, young adult ministry grants, and project grants. So leadership grants, I just want to spend just a moment to talk about those. Leadership grants are really meant for folks who want to start something new. They really feel like they have a new idea, a different idea, a new ministry. And so they need a good chunk of change to do whatever it is that they're going to do. And it is a 2-year grant. So that is the other difference. So you can apply and say that you apply for $15,000 and you get the grant. You have a 2-year period to live into that, because we know if you're starting something or doing something big, it takes longer than a year, especially now when we're doing most things virtually. I don't know about you, but I'm finding things just take longer to accomplish. So that is the leadership grant. The young adult ministry grants and the campus ministry grants are pretty much the same thing, just with 2 slightly different audiences. These are to seed something new, a project, an initiative, something that your ministry has been dreaming of doing that hasn't had the funds to do. And those are anywhere from $1,000 to $8,000. And then for project grants, these provide money for a one-time project. So for instance, one year we gave one of these grants to help a community get to their provincial gathering. Another time it was because they really wanted to do a particular book study, and so we gave them, whatever it was, the $300 to buy the books for their ministry. So it's really sort of a once and done kind of thing. Because of the varied levels, you'll see at the application process itself, the grants get more or less involved. So for project grants, we're not worried about sustainability, but we're definitely worried about or not worried, but we want you to understand that we want your ministry and your projects to be sustainable, especially at the leadership grant level. What we're trying to avoid is giving money and then 2 years later, whatever you grew dies because you don't have the funding anymore. Any questions about that before I move on?
Shannon, we have a question in the chat. Can you give an example of new in the various categories?
Yeah, so for new, it could be, so for leadership grants, I'm opening up the chat box so that I can, so for leadership grants, this would be, oftentimes it is a brand new ministry. So Diocese of San Diego wanted to, it was actually a restart, but it was essentially a new campus ministry in San Diego. And so that was considered new. Another new thing would be if you have a ministry but want to start a whole new component to it. So if you wanted to start, if you have a campus ministry and you want to start a peer ministry program to go alongside that, or an internship-based ministry to go alongside that. So it could grow out of an existing ministry, but it's really a new thing that is starting up and something big. If you're using this money to fund salaries, we really look for, especially in the leadership grant, we really look for, after that 2 years, how would that salary be funded, right? Or what other funding resources are you going to look for? Does that answer your question, Judy? Okay. Any other questions about this? All right.
Thank you for that, Shannon.
Yeah, you're welcome. Robin, I see yours. So for some people, you are in the line between leadership and project, or you have a vision that you could go really big and you want $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 to do it. But if you didn't get that, you could do something scaled back for, $5,000. You are able to submit 2 different grants with 2 different budgets, 2 different summary proposals. So it's really 2 very different grants. So you can apply for a leadership grant, and then you can apply for one of the other grants. What I would encourage you, if you're doing that, is to make sure that they're really different. Or that if you do that, you take a piece of the leadership grant and try to put it into one of the other grants. And make sure your budget reflects that. What gets confusing on our end as we're trying to read it is when we have a leadership grant and then we look at the other grant, whether it's campus ministry or young adult ministry, and go, I don't see the difference. Why would they need $20,000 to do this when they could do it for 5? So if you're going to do it that way, make sure that you really elaborate on what's going to be different for those. And to be clear, you only get one of those. You're not going to get both in a grant period. And leadership grants are for both campus ministries and young adult ministries. So leadership grants are for anyone doing ministry with people 18 to 30. And does that answer your question, Will? I hope. I can't really see you guys because I'm screen sharing. So you'll have to unmute and say yes or no.
He said
Yes,
yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is there a limit on applications for diocese grants or parish? There is not. You can apply for as many as you want. Oftentimes I get calls from bishops saying, I'm going to sign 2 grants. Is that okay? Yes, it is. And as we're going over these, if we come down to a point where we realize, oh my gosh, province 3 has gotten all of the grants, we might need to go back and look at that. So we do look at it, but it's not a top priority of we have to make sure every province or every diocese gets a grant. But it is something that we look at. So you can apply for more. And hopefully that answers that question. We can come back to that.
Shannon, is the Can you go back once?
Yep. Oh, hold on. There we go.
The last sentence in the leadership grant says that it can only be awarded to a specific ministry once every 5 years. Was that changed?
We added that last year after a couple of years of receiving, so we would grant a leadership grant, and then 2 years later when their grant ran out, they would apply for another one. And our hope, our desire for leadership grants is that we give you sort of the boost that you need to get started, and then you can continue on. What that means is you can't apply for a leadership grant again, but you could apply for a campus ministry grant or a young adult grant or a project grant. Does that make sense? So we don't want people just coming back every 2 years and asking for more leadership grants. We really want to try to diversify that and let the church spread it around the church.
Okay.
Okay. The next slide is something that Executive Council put in motion last year. And essentially what this says is your diocese has to be paying their assessment or have a waiver in order to apply for grants. And if you have a question about that, reach out to your diocese. And if they should know, and if they don't know, reach out to me and I can get a list of folks. It's a short list of folks that either aren't paying or don't have a waiver. And when I say short, it's like super short. So if you have a question about that, reach out to your diocese first, and then you can reach out to me if they're not sure or you can't get an answer. So grant discernment, we added this piece in a few years ago, and as a way to help you all not just say, ooh, I should write a grant because money's out there, but to really think about what is God calling our community to do? What is something new? What is something different? What is a dream that we haven't been able to live into because our budget doesn't allow us? So depending on the makeup of your ministry, think about who you want to bring into this discussion as a partner. Who do you need to get approval from? Who should be maybe a sounding board, but not on the actual group that's doing the work. So really think about who do you want to gather around you to help during this process. Okay. So for the grant process, we invite you to really reflect on that, both as the minister yourself and with the group, whoever it is that you gather together. So you gather, you discern, you explore, and there's a document that goes into detail about this on the webpage. And then once you've done sort of the discerning and the exploring, our experience is that you sort of discover a path, right? That Holy Spirit moment of, oh my gosh, I think we're being called to do this. And so then you get down to the planning, right? Then you get down to the detail work. What does this mean? How would we do this new vision, this new initiative? So plan that out and then reach out to a different set of people and get feedback on that. I would encourage one of those groups that you want to reach out to is either your canon to the ordinary or your bishop, because I know of at least 2 cases where they've done this work and they've reached out to their bishop and said, what do you think? And the bishop's like, oh, that's amazing. We can fund that for you. So reach out to them, or they can say, you know what, we'll give $5,000 toward this. So make sure you reach out to your diocesan leadership. You're going to need their support because your bishop needs to sign this. But you also never know what they're planning and thinking or what they might be able to kick into your budget. Once you get some feedback on your plan, you sit down, you finish it, you write it, and you submit it. So I'm not going to go through all of this because this is all online, but I wanted to highlight a few things. So the selection criteria, this is the must category. We really, as the Young Adult and Campus Ministry Council was reflecting on this, we really want folks to focus on what is some new learning that's going to come out of this? Is there some leadership development? Are you going to train up young adults to, or invite them to think differently about things? And then the second one is, of course, new this year. This has to be done within the safety protocols of COVID-19. And I'm not going to tell you what those are because each state and diocese is different. So please look at those. We want to know how your ministry is going to be supported, both now and in the future. And this is a picky one, and I'm going to come back to this later, but make sure it's formatted correctly. It just makes it reading it so much easier. And then once again, it needs to be submitted online by November 20th. Any questions about that?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering, do you all provide a template on how a successfully written grant looks so that it is formatted correctly with the parameters you provided?
Yeah, so if you go on, Wendy, can you pull up the grants page and put the link in there? It's on the young adult
Sure, I
page.
will do
Thanks.
that.
So if you go to the webpage that Wendy is going to put in the chat, at the bottom, there's a bunch of documents, which includes the discernment. It includes all of these criteria and parameters. And then for each of the different levels, be it leadership, young adult, campus ministry, or project, there are different outlines. And I'm going to get into this a little bit later, but so on that page that Wendy just posted, they're all there. And
Okay.
I will get more into the formatting and stuff just a little bit later.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Selection preferences. These are just things that are a little bit extra, right? They're not things that have to be done. But as you're thinking about it, think, well, what are the ways that we're connecting with the larger church? What are ways that we're connecting with our community? And so look through these. If make sure that if you're hitting on something that you're hearing in your diocese or at the church-wide level, that you sort of point to that and say, we're going to do anti-racism training in line with the call that General Convention gave us and the presiding bishop gave us. Just mention those things. And the final one is, I think, a fun thing, but I'm a church nerd. So find out if your grant has been something that General Convention spoke about. And I'm not just thinking this last General Convention, but like ever, right? So if you go to the website that's here, and again, this is on the website as well, you can literally search and say that you want to start a feeding program. You can just literally search in the archives, feeding program, and see what General Convention has said about that, or feeding the poor, or meal programs. And so I find that fascinating to see what our church has said throughout the years about what your community is dreaming about now. So you don't need to spend a ton of time doing that, but I think it's interesting to see where you might be called. It might be something that the church has spoken on already, or you might be starting something new and different. And either of those is fine. But just know that that resource is out there. Any questions about those? All right. So some tips. Read through the application thoroughly and make notes to yourself so that you don't miss things. Understand what it's asking and desiring. So if you have a question about that, at the end, I'm also going to point out your council members so that you can reach out to the Young Adult and Campus Ministry Council, and they can help you figure that out as well as I can. Tailor your grant to the subject, right? So if you're really focusing on a specific thing, you don't need to include everything else that your ministry is doing. Just focus on that and try to really limit yourself around that. Know your end goals and communicate them well. There have been grants in the past where we get whoops, I don't know what happened. Here we go. We get done reading them and we're like, I'm not really sure what they're trying to do. So just make sure that you communicate that well. In the end, we hope that, and then fill in the blank, whatever that's going to look like for you. Don't assume that the readers know what your ministry is or the acronyms you use. Not everyone uses acronyms the same way, so make sure that you at least spell them out at least once. Acronyms or sayings or shorthand for certain kinds of ministry might be well known where you live, but they're not known church-wide. And so just make sure that you're clear on those. If you have outside support from the diocese, from another congregation, from another partner, we've had a couple where it's two dioceses coming together to do a thing, make sure that you name that support, and that whether it's budgetary or in kind or whatever, just make sure that you name that. And then this is, and I know this is small, but this is another thing, use the given format. So on the front, every grant should have this summary page front and center. Because what happens with these grants is we print off this summary page and your grant and budget, and I literally print them off in old school and I staple them together. And so as we're going through the grants and I have a stack of them, I can quickly find yours and I can look, what category is it? How much are they asking for? Remind me what they're going to do with this money. And the summary is all on this page. So this is sort of, for me, the reminder page of, oh yeah, this is what this one's about. And this is where I make all my notes. So make sure that you have this summary page done and that it's easily accessible. So use the format. And again, the format, this seems picky, but don't get crazy with fonts and stuff. And if you've ever watched Parks and Rec, like there's a whole scene where he kind of goes crazy about fonts. Don't go crazy with fonts because there are a lot of people reading these, and the crazier you go with fonts and all that kind of stuff, the harder it is for people with learning disabilities to read and really capture. So while it might look a little bit boring, it is easier to read when it's just sort of a plain and simple. You can add pictures if you want to, but also don't go overboard on that, because then you lose space where you could be talking about your vision. I said this before, ask for someone to edit it and give feedback. Be concise and clear. So, tell us everything you need to do, tell us, but make sure that you aren't telling us in 5 paragraphs what could maybe be 2. Make sure that your summary is a clear overview of your grant. So the summary at here. So this project title and summary right here, this is really tells me, okay, I am applying for a grant to start a ministry of support animals on the campus down the street from me, and here is why, okay? So this is the very basics of just summarize what your application is and what your goals are. 1 paragraph, plain and simple. Okay, so make sure that that's clear and concise. Make sure your budget is clear and realistic. And if it's applicable, so especially for the leadership grant, what is the sustainability of it? What is your plan when the grant money is gone? What's the plan for making sure that this moves forward in the best way possible? And then how will you evaluate your grant? And those questions are all within the application themselves. Okay, any questions before I move on? Because that was a lot of tips. Any questions? All right. So again, this is another tip, but I talked about this before. This is what the archives of the Episcopal Church looks like. So you can search up resolutions and see what other people have said about what your project might be in the past. Finally, here are the people that you can reach out to. This is our formation team. Valerie is the associate for formation. So if you're having trouble, and all of our information's on the website, but if you are having trouble submitting the grant, or if you're hitting glitches, make sure to email her, or you can also email me. Wendy is on this call helping me. Thank you so much. And she's also helped us read grants in the past and is knowledgeable about them. So if you're having trouble getting through to me or to Valerie, you can also reach out to Wendy and she'll make sure that that happens. And then Bronwyn, who is our officer for youth ministries, she's helped me read a few grants in the past as well. So what question, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you guys. What questions do you have?
Do you cover redoing a website?
Yes. And I say that with enthusiasm because a couple years ago, we funded a group who not only redid their website, but as they were doing it, they taught young people how to create and manage websites. So it was sort of a two-for project. You don't all have to do that. But that is something that we cover because I was just meeting with a group of people and they said, well, do we need to have a website for this? And I said, if you don't have a website, it doesn't exist. Like if you can't search it on Google and find it, nowadays it doesn't exist. So yes, absolutely. I see David asking, can this be for an interfaith ministry? Absolutely. With interfaith or ecumenical ministries, it just has to have some sort of Episcopal component, whether that's an Episcopal board member or an Episcopal clergy person or lay person as a leader that's involved. But this can absolutely be an interfaith or ecumenical project. Yeah.
I have a question. Do you give out, I know some grantors give out past grant applications for current applicants to review and sort of look for what's been funded. Is that your method or not?
I meant to put those up and I apologize I didn't. So I will post probably this afternoon, just a couple for y'all to look through and read through. Because a lot of times that's helped others in the past really look and say, oh, that's what she means by fill in the blank. So I will post a couple of those this afternoon. Thanks, Sarah. Anything, what other questions?
I have a question. Shannon?
Yeah.
Hi, yeah. In terms of possible grants that reach out to other denominations, what are your thoughts about having the officer of another judicatory support, give his or her support, or a letter of affirmation or something like that? What is your thoughts on that?
Do you mean instead of the bishop?
No. In addition to the Episcopal, presence or support or authorization. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, definitely. We've had a couple of Episcopal Lutheran and I think one Episcopal Methodist, and they just included, an extra from their partner in ministry that says we support this, we know what's happening, and we're putting $100 toward this or whatever it was, right? But knowing that we have that support is helpful, and to hear their enthusiasm behind it is also a good thing. Thanks, Rick. Other questions? Can this cover tech software? Yes, if it's something that's going to really help the ministry, right? So I don't want to put a limit on that. But if you need software to really help your ministry, for instance, a couple of years ago, we had a chaplain who desperately needed to build up their database. And so we gave them $10,000 because they made a good case that they needed to buy the software, build up their database in order to then be able to ask their alumni for funding and stewardship help. So again, it wasn't that exciting, new, super cool thing, but it was something that has really transformed that ministry in the long term. So yes, that is possible.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is this something you offer each year, or like now's not the right time because we're sort of in leadership transition?
Yeah, so we do offer this every year. It is at the discretion of General Convention because they create our budget. So once every 3 years, they give us a chunk of money. And so we know that we have X number of dollars for 3 years. Because of COVID, I don't know yet if general convention is going to happen. So I don't know what's going to happen with budgets. I know there will probably just be a continuation budget. We'll see. But there's been no talk about cutting it and no talk about not doing these. In fact, as COVID was hitting and people were kind of worried about budgets, Executive Council made it very clear that they didn't want to cut grants because this is one way that we as churchwide can give back to local ministry and help with some of the stress that COVID is placing on our institutions and in our ministries. And so if now is not the time, well, I can't say for 100% sure. I am like pretty sure that we will have money next year and the year after and the year after to continue to do this work. Yeah, they see this as important and exciting. Yeah, Allison.
Well, I'm thinking about something, and I'm not sure whether we can get it together enough this year for a leadership grant. So could I write, campus ministry grant this year and then use it almost as a pilot to see whether a bigger program is possible?
Yes, and there have been many people that do that. They do that sort of as a stepping stone of, okay, if I can get, I'm just using an example, if I can get my peer leadership group together, then I know we can do small group ministry or vice versa, right? So they sort of use it as a stepping stone. So that is absolutely possible. It's a great question. Thanks.
Cool.
Anyone else have questions?
I have one.
Yes.
Thanks.
I will.
Are there rules about using leadership grants for staffing, or sort of particular rules about how that needs to be gone about?
Yeah, obviously with a leadership grant, if you're starting something new, oftentimes it's used for salary. What we look for as we're reading those is then a plan. Is the diocese or a congregation going to help like a tiered step-in program, right? So if you get the grant, then they'll step into helping to fund that position, or what's the plan, right? Or if you start this in 2 years, is it going to be self-sustaining? And this has happened a couple of times where we've given a big leadership grant and because funding didn't come through, the new thing just died because you can't. So just, yes, you can use it for salary, but then just be really clear in your application what comes next, so that we have a clear sense that it's been thought through. Well, we all know that funding isn't an absolute done deal, but at least you've thought it through and have support, right? So if the diocese has said, we would love to partner with you, or a congregation has said, maybe we can make this work out, as long as we know that there's some support there, that's what we're looking for with sustainability. Valerie has a question. Yeah, so at the denominational level, we define young adult as 18 to 30. And that's just so we have a cap, right? And so we have to stop somewhere. I am very aware that a lot of young adult ministry is like 20s and 30s groups. And so that's totally fine. You don't have to say, oh, you're 31, we can't fund your dinner, right? Like you can't eat tonight, or whatever. No, we're not going to do that. You can absolutely do that. We know that there's some give and take. It's just for our office, we do 18 to 30. And if you look at outside the United States, 16 to 26 is considered youth. So we're learning a whole lot about what youth and young adult means here and throughout the world. Jill, I'm reading yours. Let's see. So you're asking about renovating a building. That's a possibility if we know that it's going to have a great impact on the ministry. We've gotten a couple of renovation requests that, to be quite honest, they just, wanted some new furniture. And that was like, we'd rather fund something that's going to be really new and innovative. But it sounds like this is a totally different space. And so that's a possibility. And that's the kind of thing that we have funded some, where they want to renovate some space in order to have a new chapel, or in order to have, like you're talking about, a hospitality space. So again, it's really about how can you make the case that this is going to change or impact your ministry, and what that will do. So it's not just a renovation of your office, but something that will impact the ministry to and with young adults. And then Allison has a question about a van. Yes, we gave a grant last year for a ministry to buy a car. And we didn't give them all the money to buy the car. They had a local partner that was going to help fund a piece of it, and we helped fund a piece of it, and the diocese helped fund a piece of it. And with that, if you're looking at transportation, just make sure you check with your diocesan chancellor or canon to the ordinary about insurance and all that good stuff before you get too far down that road. I'm sure you would, but just a road of caution. Let's see. COVID unknowns. Yeah. So COVID unknowns. So this year, those people that got grants, I had to email them and say, so if you're doing a feeding ministry, obviously you're not doing that right now. So tell me what else you might do with that money, or how you might use it. And so they've given us contingency plans, right? Of, well, we're not doing a feeding program, but would it be okay if we did this switch instead? And so I think it would work in the opposite as well, right? Like if you decided to do all this work and all of it's online, or most of it's online, and then all of a sudden we have a vaccine and people can gather again, you could just email me and say, hey, now that we can gather, can we switch this up a little bit and use the money for this? And so we're pretty flexible about that, as long as it still lives into the nature of the original grant. And you're not drastically switching what you're doing, but you're just now doing a little bit differently because of COVID, or hopefully soon someday a vaccine for COVID. Yeah, good question. Yeah, so decisions are made at the February of next year, the Executive Council meeting. As soon as they're made and announced, so what happens is they say, yes, these have been approved. Then me or someone else will email you and say, yay, you got the grant. Now you have to say, yes, we accept the grant, and here's the address of where to send the check. And that address can't be your personal address. It has to be a business. So your ministry, the diocese, it can't go directly into Shannon's account. So once we get that back from you, then I give that to finance and they start processing the checks. So just depending on how long all of that takes. And again, because we're still living in COVID and I don't know what it'll look like by then, it may be a transfer, an electronic transfer that we can do, or we can do an actual check. And we'll ask that when we say, hey, yeah, you got a grant, tell us your address, and then how do you need to receive this? So it could be as early as March. It could be into April, depending on how fast you get that back to me and how swamped finance is. So there's a little give and take, but you will get it that spring. If you are wondering, I will post up, like I said, a couple of previous grants, like the full application. If you're just curious, on the same webpage that Wendy posted at the bottom, there's a list of previous grants from 2013 to last year. And so you can at least see the diocese and the title of the grant, the levels of granting, and the title, leadership grants were sometimes there, sometimes not, except we didn't always have project grants. So, but you can at least read through those and see, and then maybe even reach out to the person and say, hey, you're my good friend, Emily. I see that you got a grant 3 years ago. Tell me what that was about and how did you write it, right? So you can reach out to people that you know, or even if you don't know them, and just say, you know, tell me what your grant was about and what did you learn in applying for that. Great. I will edit this video a little bit, not a lot, but just sort of cut off some of our music time at the beginning. And then I will post it. So if you have people, like I said at the beginning, if you have people that weren't able to get on the call, or if you missed a piece of it, it'll be posted so you can go back and look at that. If you have questions, please know that you can reach out to your, and I'm looking it up right now, hang on, your council, the Young Adult and Campus Ministry Council. And I'm going to put this up. So if you go to episcopalchurch.org/YACM, which stands for Young Adult and Campus Ministry, there is a box that says, I've just changed these, so I can't remember what they all say. Connecting young adults with, oh no, that's not it. Sorry. Oh, there it is. It's right next to it. It's called YACM Council. So if you click on that, it will tell you who your council member is, and it has a little link to their emails. So feel free to reach out to them. And these are your provincial reps. The way that the reading of the grants works, thank you, Wendy, for putting that in the chat, the link. The way that this works is if I am in Province 1, I don't read any grants from Province 1. And so it's not a conflict of interest then for me as the representative to answer your questions. I'm not going to help you write the grant, but I can answer your questions, and I can coach you a little bit and ask you questions and help you clarify. So please reach out to these people as you're in the process, and their knowledge is great because most of them have read for this before, and some of them have even applied for grants before. So please use them. If you can't get a hold of them, or you don't know them, so you aren't quite sure about reaching out to them, you can also email me. And I'm happy to be in conversation with you about any questions you have or road bumps that you hit along the way. Okay. Anything else? Excellent. Well, before we sign off, I want to say a huge thank you to each and every one of you, and for the ministries that you are doing or dreaming about or hoping about. We're all living in this strange in-between time, and I know ministry can be hard, but I also think we're finding out new and different things about ministry. So I want to say a deep thank you to each of you for your tenacity and your willingness to kind of put yourself forward and continue on this crazy journey that the Holy Spirit sends us on each and every day. And I thank you for serving and doing the work that you do. So keep the faith. And as we do this, if you have questions, please reach out to people and let us know. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I will talk to you later. Bye.